In a stunning turn of events, a court in Qatar has given death sentence to 8 former Indian Navy officers on allegations of espionage. Now, this case isn't as simple as it seems. These former Indian Navy officers, some of whom are decorated heroes, found themselves imprisoned in Qatar for over a year, enduring solitary confinement. Their grim ordeal began in August 2022, that's last year, when they were arrested on charges of espionage, spying, and even allegations of state-sponsored terrorism. Who are these 8 former Indian Navy officers? Captain NAVTEJ Singh GILL, Captain Birendra Kumar Verma, Captain Saurabh Shukla, Commander AMIT NAGPAL, Commander Sugunakar Pakala, Commander SANJEEV GUPTA, Sailor Rajesh, and Commander Purnendu Tiwari. In fact, Commander Purnendu Tiwari was also awarded the prestigious Pravasi Bharatiya Samman back in 2019. Now, what adds an intriguing twist to the story is an alleged Israel connection. These 8 former Navy personnel have been tried on allegations of spying on Qatar's program to acquire Italian high-tech submarines. Now, Qatar suspects them of being spies for Israel. As per news reports, Qatar's State Security Intelligence Agency claims to have intercepted electronic communications that point to the naval officers' involvement in this submarine espionage that is being alleged. The news, meanwhile, has sent shockwaves throughout India, with the government expressing its deep concern over the incident. The Indian government will challenge the verdict. What are, meanwhile, India's options? Captured spies are entitled to the right to a fair trial under the Geneva Convention. Legally, diplomatically, and internationally, how can India now act to get her men back? I asked this question to my guests tonight. Let me first introduce them to you. I'm joined by Commodore Uday Bhaskar, former Indian Navy officer and Director of Society for Policy Studies. Parvez Memon, lawyer, also joins us on the broadcast. Saurabh Shukla, founder, newsmobile.in, joins us. And Achal Malhotra, former Indian ambassador, also joins us on the broadcast. Good evening to all of you gentlemen. Welcome. Appreciate you talking with Mirror now. First to you, Commodore Bhaskar. What do you make of this case? Here are 8 men who have been under solitary confinement in a foreign country. They're former Indian Navy officers, decorated officers of the Indian Navy, and they've been charged for espionage and spying, not for India, but for another country, and in this case, it's Israel.
My first reaction, Shreya, is that this is very distressing. In your opening remarks, you said that this has sent shockwaves. I would add deep anguish also. Because till now, very little is available in the public domain. And you will recall that ever since these officers were taken into custody and incarcerated in the early months, there has been no information except a fair amount of speculation about what they were charged with. So I think it is the opaque nature that adds to a number of questions as to why the Qatar government has behaved in this manner. And the fact that you have 8 veterans, each of them has a very, very outstanding record in the Navy. Perhaps it is their professional competence that enabled them to go to Qatar and take up the assignment that they did. And as you pointed out, one of them, Commander Tiwari, was also acknowledged for his contribution as far as both the bilateral relations between India and Qatar are concerned and the job that he was doing over there. So given this background, what had happened, what is it that the Qatar government had and was unable to share with India from what I can make out? that compelled them to award this very harsh sentence. So, as I said, it is distress, it is deep anguish, and many questions. And more so, whatever we have seen in the last few hours, ever since this came into the public domain, the sentence, that how can Qatar do this in relation to Indian citizens? At a time when the bilateral between India and Qatar is considered to be very robust, we had India conducting a very successful G20 stewardship as the president, and India's own profile. So I think this is a challenge for Indian diplomacy. It's very distressing, and the MEA statement has also conveyed the same shock and anguish. And one only hopes that this would be taken up at the highest levels. I mean, I'm suddenly reminded of that case of Italy. You remember when we had the two Italian sailors? And despite the fact that they were culpable, you saw the way in which the Italian government had, frankly, used every possible leverage that they had to get their men back. So we have a treaty with Qatar, by the way, 2016, if I remember right, where there was an agreement that was signed between India and Qatar that in such cases, if there are any charges, that the citizens concerned would be repatriated and due process of law would be prosecuted. So all these are questions that I think are to be answered. But for all of us in India, for me as a naval veteran, it's very, very distressing to see what has happened. Shreya?
All right. Can I also take this across to Achal Malhotra? Ambassador Malhotra, how do you see this in the sense, like Commodore Bhaskar said, when India and Qatar are sharing such a healthy and robust relationship, a bilateral relationship that India shares with the Arab countries? In that context, how do you see this decision by the Qatari government, given the fact that we also have an agreement with them that citizens will be repatriated in such cases?
Good evening, Shreya. At the outset, I would fully endorse what Commodore Bhaskar has said. And I think he's sharing the sentiments of every Indian that this is very disgusting, disappointing, cause a lot of anxiety and anguish. And it's beyond explanation. There's a lot of opaque nature of the whole issue. The Qatari government has kept it under the carpet. Very little information has been shared. I don't know whether our government has been informed of the exact nature of the case. All that is percolating through various sources. We are trying to, come to the conclusion that this is on account of a case of espionage. So even if it is so, I mean, I'm not saying it is so, but the kind of punishment, the extreme steps which Qatar government has decided to take is a little bit beyond explanation, unless they are trying to project it in a manner that while the nationals are Indian, but this is not anything against India. This is against Israel. And Qatar-Israel, relationship is not a secret. Everybody knows. And the Israelis are also not happy with Qatar financing Hamas and, all those kind of factors. Yes, we are going through a very good, phase of relationship between the two countries. Energy has always been on the forefront, defense, security, law and order issues, all that are now on the agenda. Indian diaspora is there, remittances are coming from there. But they have, if the Qatari government has decided to go for this extreme step, putting aside the consequences or the sentiments which will be heard in India, I'm not able to really pinpoint or figure out what could be the reasons. The only thing that comes to me is that the Israel factor, and they're probably trying to say that this is a punishment.
And therefore, Ambassador Malhotra, do you think that India is just caught in this war of the Middle East? Do you think India has just been made a pawn in the war between the Arab countries and Israel?
Yeah, Shreya, we must also not forget, well, this is a fact that these are all decorated officers of the Indian Navy. But the fact of the matter, as of today, they are not naval officers. So to that extent, it makes the picture slightly different. They went on a private employment. And from the Qatari point of view, they are private employees of a firm and which was engaged in anti-Qatari national activities. So they may think they are entitled to take a position that they have taken, but it is the fact of the matter is they remain Indian nationals, and that's where Indian government's obligations also come into play. And that's why, since August, when it came to our knowledge, the government of India has been doing all that is possible or doable, which is consular access, allowing, arranging for the legal assistance and things like that.
Yeah.
So we have only two options. One is the further legal course of action, see what legal action can be undertaken within the framework of the Qatari judiciary system or the international system. The other is to use political, take any political mileage that we can take from it and see to it that, justice is done to the 7 or 8 Indian nationals, which we think is, the kind of the manner in which they have been treated is not human. It's not done, and so we have to see what best we can do about it. After all, Qatar also has great, lot
Yeah, and
of
I
economic
think it's
interest in
also
our.
interesting that you can find one spy, you can find two spies, 8 together.
All together.
Has to be a mystery. But before I get a legal, before I get a legal opinion and I go to Parvez Memon, let me get in Saurabh Shukla, who's tweeted today saying that India should use the good offices of our friends in the region and close allies and use strategic economic leverage, especially in the investment and aviation arena. Saurabh Shukla, clearly we've had, like Commodore Bhaskar said, we've held a successful G20 event, a G20 summit where we got the world together to talk about our issues and our concerns. And therefore, India, emerging as the voice of the global south, should use its good friendly offices, not just in the region, but across the world to help get our veterans back.
I would say that this whole case has now gone beyond the normal diplomatic channels. I have to say that now it's a time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has a global image of a leader who's very well regarded by a lot of countries across the globe. He needs to step in because this is a question of 8 Indian nationals who were decorated veterans who were there in this country. The trial was clearly opaque and absurd in the manner in which this kind of a death penalty has been awarded. And, he must speak to the ruler of Qatar because certainly there are things, there is a pardon which is done by a lot of Gulf countries in cases like these. And as, Commodore Bhaskar was also saying that, Italy did that and got their nationals back, which were far more graver charges. That's one. The second thing, India today has an economic leverage when it comes to Qatar. There are a lot of countries in the region who are now friends of friends of India, who obviously have influence. Countries like the US have influence. Yes, they are embroiled in this moment to get their own hostages back, where Qatar has helped them. But Indian sailors may not be a priority. But there are enough economic leverages India has. When I mentioned specifically to aviation, Qatar has a big airline which benefits out of India frequency that it flies. That's just one of the things. There are investments of Qatari sovereign funds in India. There are energy interests which are there, and all these leverages are used and has to be used at the right level because Qatar has to know that this is not a India which will sit back and seeing its nationals being treated in this manner, because this certainly has not been a fair probe. I can tell you from sources, even the information that was coming out and was given to India's diplomats there in Qatar was far sketchy. Clearly, Qatar kept this out and they wanted to send a message through both India and Israel that we will take action. And don't know, and we cannot know the veracity of these charges also, because these are the charges which have been put up by Qatari authorities, and the trial has been completely opaque. So India must take a carrot and stick approach. I know it's a sensitive situation and not much should be discussed about it, but I certainly hope and I know that the Prime Minister has taken leadership position when it comes to issues like these, when it comes to getting Indian national out of harm's way, and he must make sure that he has a firm talk with the ruler of Qatar to tell him that this issue has a bearing on bilateral relationship at all levels. That's a message which needs to go out, because it's the question of India's prestige and also how it treats its nationals when they are in distress. Shreya?
Okay. Let me go across to Parvez Memon now. Parvez, help us first understand, is there an international law that governs cases of espionage and spying? And in case of Qatar, how does it really work? How does it operate? What's the way ahead now?
Well, hi Shreya, and I must begin to say that I completely endorse and stand by what Commander Bhaskar and Mr. Malhotra has shared here. I completely share the anguish of every Indian national today that our veteran, decorated ex-Navy men are being treated in kangaroo court in Qatar in this way, that within a year of their so-called trial, if at all it was fair, they are sentenced to death imprisonment. The remedy that is available in law is that there is appeal process in Qatar as well. This is the first instance of court where they had been tried. There will be a process of appeal indeed in the state of Qatar as well. However, given the fact that we don't repose complete confidence in this kangaroo courts in Qatar, the way they have been dealing with our people in the last 1 year that we have seen from whatever the reports that are available, though very less of it is available in public domain as of now. So we are only speculating on ifs and buts and what may have happened. So also we should be at guard that we cannot be impulsive in our reaction when there are international ramifications. So at the same time being guarded, let me just explain what the judicial process would be. As Commander Bhaskar has referred to the Italian Marine case, rightly so, that Italy has gone out of the way to see that its Italian Marines are brought back to Italy to face the trial, if any, because they insisted that a fair trial will be given to them in their own nation, and they brought them back to be tried there for whatever the charges be. Same is a bilateral treaty between India and Qatar, as Commander Bhaskar was referring to. In 2016, there is a bilateral treaty signed between Qatar and India that there is a process of repatriation of people who are of Indian origin and are sought to be tried on a foreign soil. They can be repatriated and tried for the offense in their very own country, for the reason that the trial has to be fair, justice is to be delivered, they are entitled to legal defense and representation, and that all should be taken care of by the nation who has to repatriate the nationals to the country of their origin. Having said so, if this is not done, we are also conscious of an example of a case of Kulbhushan Jadhav. We have seen in the past that Kulbhushan Jadhav was ordered to be executed in Pakistan, where we as Indians approached the International Court of Justice. So in this case as well, India has an option to knock the doors of ICJ, International Court of Justice, to first seek a stay on their execution and then take the judicial process to its logical conclusion. However, as of now, I repeat that because none of us has seen the judgment, what are the offenses, what are the charges, what was the process of the trial, whether fair trial was accorded to them, whether they had got the right to defend themselves, all this needs to be seen. And all these legal points have to be brought before the appropriate forum, be it the appellate court or be it the International Court of Justice. But at the same time, we should not be impulsive in our reactions to the extent that, threatening to withdraw from bilateral treaties or such, because it is a judicial process. We will have to read the documents and then we will have to strategize the further course of action available in law.
And Parvez, this is applicable to cases like these as well, because here the 8 Indians are not accused of spying for India. They've been accused for spying for another country. In this case, it's Israel. So
Yeah,
the legal
whatever the
process, the
charges.
judicial process remains same in this case.
Definitely, whatever the charges be, a charge
Okay.
is a charge. I am entitled for defense. I am entitled for legal representation. I am entitled for right to be heard and fairness and justice. That's all I am demanding. I am not today demanding that set them free even if they are guilty. What we are demanding today is that they are entitled to fair trial and justice, which we lose confidence in the way they have conducted themselves in the past 1 year and have rushed to award them the maximum sentence under law, which is death penalty.
Okay, okay. Ambassador Malhotra, we've seen very many geopolitical changes coming in the past few years, whether it was the Russia-Ukraine conflict or now with the Israel-Hamas conflict that is happening. India, of course, has to fight her own fight when it comes to bringing her men back to the motherland. But in case India has to garner support for this, global support for this case, which countries can it really rely on?
So obviously the big players and the players in the Middle East, including Saudi and although Saudi, I don't know how much of influence they can wield over Qatar, but United States of America and a few other, Egypt maybe, Jordan, we have good relations with them. But ultimately, I can foresee that this is going to be a very long, drawn-out process because Qataris are not likely to, give in so easily. If they were to do so, they would not have taken an extreme step like this. Probably, as our experts, the legal experts have said, first we have to establish a case. We have to understand what is what, and where do we stand on the legal front. So these two processes probably will have to go side by side. While we have to pursue the legal options, we have also to use the diplomatic channels, which is direct diplomatic channels at appropriate level, and also through our other interlocutors and friends in the region. So the countries I have said mostly, I mean, and we must not understand the Qatar's behavior is not, it's not about power. Only 3 years ago, they were boycotted by all bigwigs of the Middle East region. There was a political trade and travel, blockade of this country from 2017 to 2021. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, and then later they were joined by Yemen, Maldives, and many other countries. Qatar has been resisting, even despite being persuaded, pushed, and sort of under pressure, not to support the Islamist fundamentalists or have any track to do with the terror organization. So, not an easy nut to crack. I'm trying to be very candid. My sentiments, my emotions, my sympathies are all with my naval officers, formerly, and their families, of course. And I would definitely like to see that justice is meted out to them. But the circumstances are such that what I foresee is it's going to be a long, drawn-out, process, and we should be prepared for that.
Okay.
Now it's a question of just last one point. You have to do the cost-benefit analysis to see to what extent you can put your bilateral ties on stake. It's true. It's both ways. They sell us gas, but we also need that. We have so much of almost, I think, 7-8 lakh Indians who are working in the region. Their sources, it's a sources of earnings for them, and also some remittances by India. So there are many issues involved. So do we have to, as Mr. My co-panelist said, we should not jump into any, impulsive action. That's very important. And I'm sure our government will take it.
Okay, okay. Let me go across to Commodore Bhaskar. Commodore Bhaskar, you've served in the Indian Navy, and beyond the politics and the diplomacy and the strategy, I want to ask you about the families, the kith and kin of these officers who must be, we can't even imagine the kind of state they must be in right now.
These families have gone through a very, very anguishing period, Shreya. If you recall the early weeks and months, there was complete silence about what was happening to these officers. The families were not allowed to make contact. If I recall right, they were not even given consular access by the Indian mission over there. So over the last year plus, the families of these 8 Indian naval personnel have gone through hell. And they didn't have anyone who was able to offer them any tangible support or solace except from within the Navy. And there was a sense that they were abandoned. And I'm sorry that I'm sounding so sad about this, and also I'm using such extreme turn of phrase. But from the time this case came into the public domain, it seemed that the Indian government was not able to prevail upon the Qatar government to act in this manner. And even now, if you look at the MEA statement, they talk about being shocked at this Qatari pronouncement, the extremely death penalty being awarded. So that's my constant sort of, I would say, refrain, and I'm very concerned about this, that can we abandon Indian nationals like this? In the public domain, it did not seem that India was exerting pressure. Yes, India was leaving no stone unturned about its own profile in the international domain, G20, various summits, and the Prime Minister's own personal, I would say, ability to reach out to global leaders. That didn't seem to work when it came to these naval officers. And I'm sharing what has been said amongst the veteran community over the last year plus. Everybody was under what I would call as self-regulation and restraint, saying that the government is doing what it can do, but obviously it wasn't reaching out to the Qataris. So there's anguish, there's anger, but it's all very muted just now, and I think these families need to really be reached out to, because they've gone through a very, very anguishing period. And now with this death sentence, you can imagine each of these families, children, wives, parents. This is a very, very traumatic, and as I said, the only word that comes to mind is anguish and anger at what has happened. Yeah.
Okay, quick last word to Saurabh Shukla before I wrap this up. Saurabh, how do you see this really moving forward now? Can we expect now the government to be finally, like Commodore Bhaskar said, they have not been very proactive in taking this up. Now, of course, can we expect government to government talks and diplomacy to take place more?
Well, Shreya, as I said it earlier, I only see a high-level intervention helping in this issue, because Qatar has clearly upped. I would say they've clearly are testing India's nerves and India's patience on this. Clearly, there is something else at play here. And only a high-level intervention can really lead to an outcome which is favorable to these 8, naval personnel and their families. Because also, as I said, they're also testing India's resolve, because everybody knows that in many, in a lot of people, and I've been talking to a lot of people, that these charges, again, it was an opaque trial, nobody got access, and yet they have decided to award a death penalty. Means that they're obviously clearly testing India's patience on this, and India will have to use whatever influence it has, not only by reaching out to the ruler of Qatar, but also making sure that they exert enough pressure from friends and allies of Qatar in the global community, because that's very important and time is of essence. I still feel that if
we'll
we
have
can sort
to see
it out,
how
there
this
are
moves
enough
forward, how the
manner
Indian
in which
government
we
takes
can
this up
get these personnel
globally.
back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can expect more transparency from the side of Qatar when it comes to this case. I'll wrap this up here. Of course, we will wait and watch how the Indian government moves through this, maneuvers its way through this case. But thank you to all my panelists tonight, Commodore Bhaskar, Parvez Memon, Achal Malhotra and Saurabh Shukla. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on Mirror Now. and sharing your thoughts on this extremely concerning case of the Indian nationals who have been awarded death penalty in Qatar. We'll keep getting you the latest on that, but right now,